The sun was setting over the city skyline as Patricia Benton stepped out of her taxi in front of the Grand Plaza Hotel. She pulled her small carry-on suitcase behind her, the wheels catching on the uneven pavement. After 14 hours of travel, including a delayed flight and a taxi driver who took the longest route possible from the airport, Patricia was exhausted. Her normally neat brown hair hung limply around her face, and the wrinkles in her jeans and simple blue blouse told the story of her long journey. The doorman barely glanced at her as she approached. His attention focused on a sleek black car pulling up behind her taxi. Patricia noticed his quick dismissal but said nothing. She'd grown used to being overlooked when she wasn't dressed in her usual business attire. The Grand Plaza stood like a gleaming tower of glass and steel against the darkening sky, its entrance adorned with polished marble and tasteful gold accents. As Patricia walked through the revolving doors, the cool air-conditioned breeze was a welcome relief from the summer heat outside. The lobby stretched out before her, a vast space with high ceilings, crystal chandeliers and plush carpeting. Well-dressed guests milled about, many wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than Patricia's monthly mortgage payment. Despite owning a controlling stake in the hotel chain, she preferred to live modestly, saving her money for investments rather than luxuries. Patricia approached the front desk, where 3 employees in crisp uniforms were attending to guests. She stood in line behind a couple wearing matching tennis outfits, complete with monogrammed sweaters tied around their shoulders. When it was finally her turn, she stepped up to the counter with a tired smile. "Good evening," she said, her voice slightly hoarse from the dry airplane air. "I have a reservation under Benton." The young man behind the counter, whose name tag read Anthony, looked her up and down with a barely concealed expression of surprise. His perfectly groomed eyebrows rose slightly as he took in her casual appearance. "Benton, you said?" he asked, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. His tone suggested he might have heard her incorrectly. "Yes, Patricia Benton," she confirmed, sliding her ID across the counter. Anthony picked up her license with 2 fingers, as if it might be dirty, and examined it closely before turning to his computer. His colleague, a woman with a tight blonde bun who was arranging keycards nearby, glanced over and raised her eyebrows questioningly. "She says she has a reservation," Anthony murmured, just loud enough for Patricia to hear. The woman, whose name tag read Victoria, peered over his shoulder at the screen. "The executive suite?" Victoria whispered, making no effort to hide her surprise. "Are you sure that's the right reservation?" Patricia pretended not to hear them, though their words carried clearly across the marble counter. She'd specifically booked the executive suite not for its luxury, but because she wanted to experience the same room that many of their business clients stayed in. As the new regional director, she needed to understand every aspect of the guest experience. "Yes, I have you here, Ms. Benton," Anthony finally confirmed, his tone slightly more professional. "The executive suite for 5 nights. I'll just need a credit card for incidentals." Patricia handed over her plain black credit card, not the platinum or gold that they were probably expecting. Anthony swiped it and frowned at the screen. "Is there a problem?" Patricia asked. No problem," he replied, though his expression suggested otherwise. "It's just that the executive suite includes access to our premium lounge and services." His eyes flicked over her casual clothes again. "The lounge does have a dress code in the evenings. Business casual at minimum." "I'm aware of the dress code," Patricia said calmly. "I have appropriate clothes in my luggage." Victoria stepped closer, her perfume wafting over the counter. "Perhaps Ms. Benton would be more comfortable in one of our standard rooms. They're quite nice as well and more accessible price-wise." Patricia met the woman's gaze steadily. "The executive suite will be fine, thank you." Anthony cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Of course. You're all set then." He handed her the key card and a fancy folder with the hotel's logo embossed in gold. "The elevators are to your right. The executive suite is on the 30th floor." "Thank you," Patricia said, taking the folder. "I'd also like to check in early if that's possible." "I've had a very long flight." Anthony and Victoria exchanged glances. "Early check-in for the suites is an additional fee of $100, Victoria explained with a tight smile. "It's clearly stated in our booking terms." Patricia knew this wasn't true. Early check-in was complimentary for suite guests when available. It was a policy she herself had approved just 3 months ago. But she decided to let it slide for now, making another mental note. "That's fine," she said simply. "Please add it to my bill." Victoria seemed surprised by her easy agreement but quickly recovered. "Certainly, Ms. Benton." She tapped something into the computer, likely adding the unnecessary charge. As Patricia turned to leave, she heard Anthony whisper to Victoria, "Maybe she won a contest or something?" Victoria snickered. "Or maybe she's someone's personal assistant." Patricia pretended not to hear as she walked away, pulling her small suitcase toward the elevator. She didn't need to defend herself or reveal her position. In fact, this unplanned undercover experience was proving more valuable by the minute. As she waited for the elevator, Patricia observed a group of hotel employees gathered near the concierge desk. They were huddled together, occasionally glancing in her direction. One of them, a tall man with a manager's pin on his lapel, was gesturing subtly toward her while speaking to the others. The elevator arrived with a soft ding, and Patricia stepped inside. Just before the doors closed, two hotel employees, a young woman and man who looked to be in their 20s, hurried in. They were dressed in the hotel's signature uniform but were clearly off duty, with their jackets unbuttoned and name tags removed. "Hold the elevator," called a voice, and a hand shot between the closing doors. They reopened to reveal a middle-aged man in a chef's uniform, his white hat slightly askew. "Thanks," he said, stepping in and pressing the button for the 25th floor, the hotel's renowned restaurant. The two younger employees nodded politely at him, but then exchanged meaningful glances with each other. The young woman pressed the button for floor 18, then leaned against the wall of the elevator, not acknowledging Patricia. "Did you see what they gave her?" the young woman whispered to her colleague, not quite quietly enough. "The executive suite." The young man snorted. "Maybe she's related to someone important. She sure doesn't look like she belongs there." The chef frowned at them but said nothing, staring straight ahead at the elevator doors. Patricia kept her eyes on her phone, scrolling through emails while listening to their conversation. After years in the hotel business, she'd developed a thick skin, but their words still stung. Not because she cared about their judgment, but because this was exactly the kind of behavior that drove guests away. How many other people had received this treatment at her hotels? The elevator stopped at floor 18 and the two young employees got off, still whispering and laughing together. As the doors closed, the chef turned to Patricia. "I apologize for their behavior," he said quietly. "Not all our staff are so unprofessional." Patricia looked up, surprised by his kindness. "Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm Carlos, the sous chef at Altitude," he said, referring to the hotel's 5-star restaurant. "If you'd like to dine with us during your stay, just mention my name. I'll make sure you're well taken care of." "That's very kind," Patricia replied with a genuine smile. "I'm Patricia." Carlos nodded respectfully. "Enjoy your stay, Patricia." The elevator stopped at floor 25, and with a small wave, he was gone. When Patricia finally reached the 30th floor, she found herself in a quiet, elegantly decorated hallway. The plush carpet muffled her footsteps as she made her way to the executive suite. Using her keycard, she opened the door and stepped inside. The suite was impressive, a spacious living area with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city, a separate bedroom with a king-sized bed, and a marble bathroom larger than some apartments she'd lived in when she was younger. But Patricia wasn't here to enjoy the luxury. She was here to evaluate the hotel's operations from a guest's perspective, and so far, the experience had been enlightening. She set her suitcase on the luggage rack and unzipped it, pulling out her laptop. After connecting to the hotel's Wi-Fi, she opened a new document and began typing notes about her check-in experience. The condescending attitudes, the unnecessary fee, the whispering and judgment, all of it would be addressed, but not yet. First, she wanted to see how deep the problem went. Patricia changed into comfortable clothes and lay down on the bed, intending to rest for just a few minutes before unpacking properly. But the exhaustion of travel caught up with her, and she drifted off to sleep, her mind already planning how she would transform the culture of the Grand Plaza, starting with the front desk staff who had no idea that their new boss was already in the building, taking notes on every interaction. Patricia woke up disoriented, the heavy curtains blocking all sunlight from the room. She fumbled for her phone on the nightstand and squinted at the screen. 7:30 p.m. She had slept for nearly 3 hours. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since the disappointing airplane meal hours ago. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and ran her fingers through her tangled hair. A shower and dinner were definitely in order. After a quick shower in the luxurious marble bathroom, Patricia felt more like herself. She dried her hair and applied light makeup, then opened her suitcase to find something suitable to wear. She had packed mostly business attire for the meetings she would be conducting later in the week, but she also had a simple black dress that would work for dinner. Once dressed, Patricia stepped back to look at herself in the full-length mirror. The transformation was significant, from the rumpled traveler who had checked in earlier to a polished professional woman. She smiled at her reflection, curious to see if the staff would even recognize her. The elevator ride down to the lobby was uneventful, with only one other passenger, an older gentleman who nodded politely before returning to his newspaper. When the doors opened to the lobby, Patricia was greeted by the sounds of live piano music and the gentle hum of conversation from the hotel bar. She decided to eat at Altitude, the hotel's signature restaurant on the 25th floor. Remembering the kind sous chef who had spoken to her earlier, as she walked toward the elevator bank, she passed by the front desk where she had checked in. Victoria was still there, now accompanied by a different male colleague. Neither of them looked up as Patricia walked by, not recognizing her in her evening attire. When Patricia reached the restaurant, she was greeted by a hostess with a practiced smile. "Good evening, ma'am. Do you have a reservation?" "No, I don't," Patricia replied. "But I was hoping you might have a table available." The hostess consulted her tablet, her smile faltering slightly. "I'm afraid we're fully booked this evening. The earliest I could seat you would be at 9:45. Patricia nodded, understanding. Altitude was known for being difficult to get into without a reservation. "That's fine. I'll just grab something from the bar downstairs." As she turned to leave, she heard a familiar voice. "Miss Benton." She looked back to see Carlos, the sous chef from the elevator, approaching in his white uniform. "I thought that was you," he said with a warm smile. "Were you hoping to dine with us tonight?" "Yes, but I understand you're fully booked," Patricia replied. Carlos turned to the hostess. "Lisa, we can seat Miss Benton at the chef's table, can't we?" The hostess blinked in surprise. "The chef's table? But Mr. Reynolds hasn't approved." "I'm approving it," Carlos said firmly. "Miss Benton is a special guest." The hostess looked confused but nodded. "Of course. Right this way, ma'am." As Patricia followed the hostess through the restaurant, she noticed the curious glances from other staff members. The chef's table was a coveted spot with a view of the kitchen, usually reserved for food critics or celebrity guests. "Enjoy your meal, Miss Benton," the hostess said, placing a menu on the table. "Your server will be with you shortly." "Thank you," Patricia replied, settling into her seat. She had a perfect view of both the kitchen and the dining room, allowing her to observe the operations from a unique vantage point. A server approached, looking slightly nervous. "Good evening, Miss Benton. My name is Tina, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you off with something to drink?" "A glass of sparkling water would be lovely, thank you," Patricia said. As Tina walked away, Patricia noticed a small commotion near the kitchen entrance. A man in an executive chef's jacket was speaking animatedly to Carlos, occasionally gesturing in her direction. She pretended not to notice, focusing on the menu instead. When Tina returned with her water, Patricia asked, "What would you recommend tonight?" "The sea bass is exceptional," Tina suggested. "Chef prepares it with a lemon caper sauce that's quite popular." "That sounds perfect," Patricia said, handing back the menu. As she sipped her water, Patricia observed the restaurant staff. Most were professional and attentive, moving efficiently between tables. But she couldn't help noticing a few who seemed more interested in chatting with each other than attending to guests. Near the bar area, she spotted the same young man and woman from the elevator earlier. They were in uniform now, serving drinks but still finding time to whisper to each other between orders. Patricia watched as they snickered over something, the young woman occasionally glancing in her direction. Curious, Patricia pulled out her phone and pretended to check emails while actually using the voice memo app to record. She set the phone down on the table, screen dark, and took another sip of her water. A few minutes later, the two employees approached the service station near her table to pick up drink orders. Their conversation drifted clearly to where she sat. "That's her, the one Carlos put at the chef's table," the young woman whispered. "Doesn't she look different?" "Wait, is that the same woman from earlier? The one in the wrinkled clothes?" the young man asked, sounding surprised. "Yes, I guess she does clean up nice, but I still don't get why she's at the chef's table. Maybe she's someone's mistress, the young man suggested with a smirk. Some rich guy probably set her up in the executive suite. Or she could be one of those social media people. What do they call them? Influencers? The woman said, rolling her eyes. They're always trying to get free stuff. Well, whatever she is, she doesn't belong at the chef's table. That's usually for actual important people. They grabbed their drink trays and moved away, unaware that Patricia had heard every word. She stopped the recording on her phone and took a deep breath, keeping her expression neutral. Their comments stung, but they also confirmed what she had suspected. There was a culture problem at this hotel that needed addressing. Her meal arrived, presented by Carlos himself. The sea bass as recommended, he said, placing the beautifully arranged plate before her. I hope you enjoy it, Ms. Benton. Thank you, Carlos, she said with a genuine smile. It looks wonderful. As she ate, Patricia continued to observe the restaurant operations. Most of the staff were professional, but the pattern was becoming clear. There was a small group of employees who seemed to think they were above the rules, who treated certain guests differently based on appearances. After finishing her excellent meal, Patricia was enjoying a cup of coffee when a tall man in an expensive suit approached her table. His name tag identified him as Richard Powell, hotel manager. Ms. Benton, he said smoothly, extending his hand. I wanted to personally welcome you to the Grand Plaza. I hope you're finding everything to your satisfaction. Patricia shook his hand, noting that news of her presence had finally made its way to management. The meal was excellent, she replied. Carlos is very talented. Yes, he is one of our finest, Richard agreed. I understand there was some confusion at check-in earlier. Please accept my apologies for any inconvenience, so he knew about that too. Interesting. No apologies necessary, Patricia said. It's been quite informative, actually. Richard looked slightly uncomfortable. Well, if there's anything you need during your stay, please don't hesitate to call me directly. He handed her his business card. Actually, Patricia said, I was hoping to tour the hotel facilities tomorrow. The spa, the conference rooms, perhaps the kitchens. Of course, Richard replied, though his smile seemed strained. I'd be happy to arrange that for you. Shall we say 10 a.m. in the lobby? Perfect, Patricia said. I look forward to it. After Richard left, Patricia finished her coffee and asked for the check. Tina appeared almost instantly. There's no charge, Miss Benton, she said. Mr. Powell has taken care of it. Patricia raised an eyebrow. That's very kind but unnecessary. I'd like to pay for my meal, please. Tina looked uncertain. I'll have to check with Mr. Powell. No need, Patricia said firmly, handing over her credit card. Please run the charge. Reluctantly, Tina took the card and went to process the payment. When she returned with the receipt, Patricia added a generous tip and signed her name. As she stood to leave, she noticed Carlos watching from the kitchen doorway. He gave her a small nod, which she returned with a smile. On her way back to the elevator, Patricia passed through the lobby bar where several hotel guests were enjoying evening cocktails. The atmosphere was lively, with soft jazz playing in the background. She decided to stop for a nightcap before returning to her room. Finding an empty seat at the bar, she ordered a simple glass of wine. As she waited, she became aware of a conversation happening just behind her, where several hotel employees were gathered at a small service table, apparently on their break. Powell is freaking out, one of them said in a hushed voice. Apparently that woman in the black dress is here to evaluate the hotel. What? The one at the chef's table? Another voice asked. But she checked in looking like she'd been sleeping in her clothes. Patricia woke early the next morning, feeling refreshed and ready for the day ahead. She had slept surprisingly well, perhaps because she was finally adjusting to the time zone, or maybe because she was looking forward to what was coming. After a quick workout in the hotel's fitness center, where thankfully no one paid her much attention, she showered and dressed in one of her business suits, a navy blue ensemble that was professional without being overly formal. At precisely 10 a.m., Patricia stepped out of the elevator into the lobby. Richard Powell was already waiting, looking slightly anxious as he checked his watch. When he spotted her, his face brightened with a practiced smile. Ms. Benton, good morning, he said, extending his hand. I trust you slept well? Very well, thank you, Patricia replied, shaking his hand firmly. Wonderful. I've arranged a complete tour of our facilities as you requested. He gestured toward the marble hallway leading away from the lobby. Shall we begin with our conference spaces? For the next hour, Richard led Patricia through the hotel's various amenities, the elegant ballrooms, the state-of-the-art conference rooms, the luxurious spa, and the rooftop pool area. Throughout the tour, Patricia asked detailed questions about operations, staffing, and guest feedback. Richard answered most confidently, though he occasionally seemed surprised by the specificity of her inquiries. You seem to know quite a bit about hotel management, Ms. Benton, he commented as they rode the elevator back down from the rooftop. I've spent some time in the industry, Patricia replied vaguely. May I ask what brings you to the Grand Plaza? Are you considering us for a corporate event? Patricia smiled. Something like that. I'm evaluating the property for potential future use. Richard nodded, clearly trying to place her in his mental catalog of potential clients. Well, we would be honored to host any events you might be planning. Our team is exceptionally skilled at handling corporate functions. Speaking of your team, Patricia said as the elevator doors opened to the lobby, I'd like to meet more of the staff, not just management, but the people who interact with guests every day. Richard hesitated for just a moment. Of course, as it happens, we have a staff meeting scheduled for this afternoon at 3 p.m. Perhaps you'd like to attend? It would give you a chance to see our whole team at once. That would be perfect, Patricia agreed. Where will the meeting be held? In the Windsor Ballroom, Richard said. It's our largest space. We use it for full staff gatherings. Excellent. I'll see you there at 3 then. Patricia extended her hand. Thank you for the tour, Richard. After parting ways with the manager, Patricia decided to have lunch in one of the hotel's casual dining spaces, a cafe overlooking the garden courtyard. As she enjoyed her meal, she noticed Anthony, the front desk clerk from yesterday, entering with another employee. They took a table across the room, not noticing Patricia. She could tell from Anthony's animated gestures that he was upset about something. Casually, Patricia took out her phone and opened the voice memo app again, setting it on the table before taking another bite of her salad. I can't believe Powell is making us all attend this meeting, Anthony was saying, his voice carrying just enough for Patricia to hear. It's not like we don't know how to do our jobs. His companion, a young man Patricia hadn't seen before, nodded sympathetically. I heard it's because of that woman who checked in yesterday, the one who got the special treatment at altitude. Victoria said she's some kind of corporate spy, Anthony replied. She thinks the woman is here to report back to the hotel chain executives. Is that why Powell's been running around like his tie is too tight? Anthony snorted. You should have seen him this morning, giving her the grand tour like she was royalty. Victoria's worried we might all get written up because of the check-in fee thing. What check-in fee thing? Anthony lowered his voice, forcing Patricia to strain to hear. We charged her an early check-in fee even though she was in a suite. Victoria says it's against policy. So, people never read the fine print anyway. They'll pay whatever we tell them to. Yeah, but this one might actually know the rules. Victoria's freaking out. Their conversation shifted to other topics, and Patricia stopped recording. She finished her lunch thoughtfully, contemplating how to handle the afternoon meeting. She had originally planned to reveal herself tomorrow, but perhaps it would be better to do it today, while the staff was already gathered. After lunch, Patricia returned to her suite to prepare. She called Carlos, the sous chef who had been kind to her, and asked him to meet her privately before the meeting. Then she opened her laptop and composed a detailed email to her executive team, outlining what she had observed at the Grand Plaza and her plans for addressing the issues. At 2:30 p.m., Patricia changed into her most professional outfit, a charcoal gray suit with a crisp white blouse and her favorite pair of heels. She added her signature pearl earrings and the small gold pin that bore the logo of Benton Hospitality Group. Usually she kept the pin in her pocket during undercover visits, but today she wanted it visible. Carlos knocked on her door at 2:45 p.m., looking confused but curious. Ms. Benton, he said when she opened the door. You wanted to see me? Yes, Carlos. Please come in. Patricia gestured to the sitting area of her suite. I wanted to thank you for your kindness yesterday, both in the elevator and at dinner. Carlos smiled, still looking puzzled. It was nothing, really. Just doing my job. That's exactly it, Patricia said, sitting across from him. You were doing your job, treating every guest with respect and dignity regardless of how they were dressed or who you thought they might be. Carlos nodded slowly. Of course. That's what we're supposed to do. Unfortunately, not everyone at this hotel shares your philosophy. Patricia paused, then decided it was time to be direct. Carlos, I'm not just a regular guest. My name is Patricia Benton, and I'm the CEO of Benton Hospitality Group. We acquired the Grand Plaza chain 3 months ago. Carlos's eyes widened in shock. You own the hotel? Yes, Patricia confirmed. I often visit our properties incognito to experience them as a regular guest would. It helps me understand what's working and what needs improvement. And the Grand Plaza needs improvement, Carlos said, understanding dawning on his face. In some areas, yes, particularly in how certain staff members treat guests they don't perceive as important or wealthy. Patricia leaned forward. I'm going to reveal my identity at the staff meeting today, and I wanted to prepare you. Your job is secure. In fact, I'd like to discuss a promotion with you later, but there will be changes coming. Carlos nodded, still processing the revelation. Thank you for telling me, and for recognizing that not all of us are, well, like Anthony and Victoria. I believe in addressing problems, not punishing people, Patricia assured him, but I also believe in accountability. The culture here needs to change. At 2:55 p.m., Patricia and Carlos left the suite together and headed down to the Windsor Ballroom. They parted ways at the entrance, with Carlos joining the kitchen staff, while Patricia found Richard waiting anxiously near the door. Miss Benton, he greeted her. I'm so pleased you could join us. I've arranged for you to say a few words after I open the meeting, if that's acceptable. Perfect, Patricia agreed. But I'd like to sit quietly and observe for a bit first, if you don't mind. Richard seemed surprised but nodded. Of course, whatever you prefer. Inside the ballroom, nearly 200 employees were gathered. They sat in neat rows facing a small stage where a podium had been set up. Patricia took a seat in the back row, watching as the last few staff members hurried in. She spotted Victoria and Anthony entering together, looking nervous as they scanned the room. Their eyes passed over Patricia without recognition, her transformation from rumpled traveler to polished executive complete. At exactly 3 p.m., Richard stepped up to the podium and tapped the microphone. Good afternoon, everyone, he began. Thank you for attending this special staff meeting. As many of you know, the Grand Plaza was acquired by the Benton Hospitality Group earlier this year. Today we have a special guest with us who would like to observe our operations and perhaps share some insights. A murmur ran through the crowd. Patricia could see people turning to each other, whispering questions and speculations. Before I introduce our guest, I want to remind everyone of our core values at the Grand Plaza, Richard continued. Excellence, integrity, and respect for every guest, regardless of who they are or why they're staying with us. Patricia noticed Victoria shifting uncomfortably in her seat. Anthony was staring at his shoes. I'd also like to take this opportunity to announce that we will be implementing some new training programs in the coming weeks, Richard said. These programs will focus on customer service and our guest-first philosophy. Another murmur swept through the crowd, louder this time. Patricia could see confusion on many faces. This clearly wasn't the routine staff meeting they had expected. A hush fell over the ballroom as Patricia took her place behind the podium. For a moment, she simply stood there, looking out at the sea of faces staring back at her. Some showed shock, others confusion, and a few, like Victoria and Anthony in the third row, displayed unmistakable horror. Thank you, Richard, Patricia said, her voice calm and clear through the microphone. Good afternoon, everyone. As Richard mentioned, I'm Patricia Benton, CEO of Benton Hospitality Group. We acquired the Grand Plaza chain 3 months ago, and I've been visiting each property to get a first-hand understanding of the guest experience. She paused, letting her gaze travel across the room. For those who don't know, it's my practice to check into our hotels as a regular guest first. without announcing who I am. I find it gives me the most authentic perspective on what our actual customers experience. Patricia could see understanding dawning on more faces now. In the back row, the young man and woman from the elevator and restaurant were whispering urgently to each other, their eyes wide with panic. I checked in yesterday afternoon, Patricia continued. I had just come off a long flight. I was tired, my clothes were wrinkled, and I certainly didn't look like what some might expect of a hotel chain CEO. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her phone. I'd like to share some observations from my stay so far. Patricia tapped the screen of her phone, and her own voice filled the ballroom. I have a reservation under Benton. Then came Anthony's voice, clearly recorded at the front desk. Benton, you said? Followed by the exchange with Victoria about the executive suite. The recording continued, capturing the whispered comments about Patricia winning a contest or being someone's personal assistant. Then it moved to the elevator conversation where the two young employees had speculated about how she didn't belong in the executive suite. As the recording played, Patricia watched the reactions. Anthony and Victoria had sunk lower in their seats, their faces flushed with embarrassment. The young elevator employees looked like they wanted to disappear entirely, but most of the other staff members appeared genuinely shocked and dismayed by what they were hearing. Patricia stopped the recording. I have more, including some interesting conversations from the restaurant last night and the cafe this afternoon, but I think you get the idea. She set her phone down and gripped the edges of the podium. Let me be clear about something. I'm not here to embarrass anyone or to hand out punishments. I'm here because I care deeply about this hotel and every person who works here. She stepped out from behind the podium and moved to the front of the stage, wanting to remove the barrier between herself and the staff. The Grand Plaza has a proud history of excellence. For decades, this hotel has been known for its impeccable service and welcoming atmosphere. That's why I wanted to add it to our portfolio. But somewhere along the way, some of you seem to have forgotten what the hospitality industry is really about. Patricia's voice softened. It's not about catering to the wealthy or famous. It's about making every person who walks through those doors feel valued and respected, regardless of what they're wearing, how they look, or how much money you think they have. She could see heads nodding throughout the room. Even some of those she'd caught behaving badly were listening intently now. Yesterday, I experienced two very different versions of the Grand Plaza. From some of you, I received judgment, condescension, and outright mockery. You decided within seconds that I didn't belong here, that I wasn't worth your full attention or respect. Patricia's gaze lingered briefly on Victoria and Anthony, who couldn't meet her eyes. But from others, she continued, looking toward Carlos, I experienced true hospitality, kindness without agenda, respect offered freely not because of who I might be, but simply because I was a guest in your hotel. Carlos gave her a small smile of encouragement. That difference between treating people based on appearances versus treating everyone with equal dignity is what will determine the future of this hotel under my leadership. Patricia paced slowly across the stage. Starting tomorrow, we'll be implementing some changes. First, we're revising our training programs to emphasize that every guest deserves our best service. Second, we'll be creating a new feedback system where guests can recognize staff members who exemplify our values. And third, we'll be reviewing all our policies to ensure they're clear, fair, and consistently applied. She stopped and turned to face them directly again. Now, I imagine some of you are worried about your jobs, especially those of you who might have been recorded treating me less than professionally. A nervous tension filled the room. Victoria looked close to tears while Anthony stared at the floor. I believe in second chances, Patricia said firmly. I believe people can learn and grow, so no one is being fired today. The relief in the room was almost palpable. Victoria's shoulders slumped as she exhaled heavily. However, Patricia continued, her tone more serious. I do believe in accountability. Those staff members who were recorded behaving inappropriately will be meeting with HR tomorrow to discuss retraining opportunities. This isn't punishment. It's a chance to realign with our core values. She moved back to the podium and picked up her notes. Before I hand this back to Richard, I want to recognize someone who exemplifies the standard I expect from everyone at the Grand Plaza. Carlos Martinez, would you please stand? Surprised, Carlos slowly rose from his seat in the middle of the room. From the moment we met in the elevator when you didn't know who I was, you treated me with kindness and respect. You defended me when others were being unkind. And you went out of your way to ensure I had a wonderful dining experience. That's the spirit of hospitality I want to see throughout this hotel. Carlos nodded humbly as appreciative applause broke out around him. Thank you, Carlos. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss a new position we're creating, Director of Guest Experience. I think you'd be perfect for it. As Carlos sat down looking stunned but pleased, Patricia addressed the room one final time. I'll be staying at the Grand Plaza for the rest of the week. I look forward to getting to know more of you personally. My door's open if anyone wants to talk. Thank you for your time today. She handed the microphone back to Richard and took a seat at the side of the stage as he stepped forward to wrap up the meeting. Thank you, Ms. Benton, Richard said, his voice slightly strained. I think we all have a lot to reflect on. Department heads, please stay behind for a brief discussion. Everyone else is dismissed and we'll see you at your next scheduled shift. As the staff began filing out, Patricia watched the different reactions. Most people were talking in hushed, urgent tones. Some looked thoughtful, others worried. Victoria was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue while Anthony walked beside her, his expression somber. The young man and woman from the elevator were among the last to leave, both looking thoroughly chastened. As they passed near the stage, Patricia heard the young woman say, I feel awful. I can't believe we said those things. Do you think she'll really give us a second chance? The young man asked. I don't know, but I'm going to apologize to her face either way. Patricia smiled slightly hearing this. Perhaps her message had gotten through after all. After the ballroom had emptied except for the department heads, Richard approached Patricia with an anxious expression. Ms. Benton, I want to personally apologize for any disrespect you experienced. I had no idea. Patricia raised a hand to stop him. Richard, we'll have a private conversation about management's role in shaping the culture here. But right now I'd like you to continue with your meeting. I'm going back to my suite for a while. Of course, Richard nodded quickly. We have a dinner scheduled with the executive team at 7, if that still works for you. That's fine, Patricia replied, standing up. I'll see you then. As she walked back to her suite, Patricia reflected on the meeting. The shocked faces, the embarrassment, the fear, but also the signs of genuine remorse and willingness to change. She hadn't come here to punish people, but to transform the culture. And based on what she'd seen today, there was reason to hope. When she reached her suite, Patricia kicked off her heels and sat down on the sofa with a sigh. Her phone buzzed with a message from her executive assistant asking how the meeting had gone. Better than expected, Patricia typed back. Some problems to fix, but good people to work with. I think the Grand Plaza is going to be just fine. She set her phone down and gazed out the window at the city skyline. Tomorrow would bring difficult conversations, but also new beginnings. And maybe, just maybe, a few people had learned an important lesson about judging others by appearances.